To the man who paid for it all, but was never my real love. The room didn't go quiet. No, it gasped, then giggled. Nervous laughter rippled through the guests like a cough in church. You could practically hear tuxedos tightening and champagne glasses pausing midair. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the old brass key, the one she thought led to the wine cellar, and set it on the long oak table in front of me. A soft metallic clink, swallowed instantly by silence. I didn't touch my drink. I didn't acknowledge the people at our table, or her frozen father 2 seats down. I just walked, past the florist's overpriced hydrangeas, past the string quartet that immediately stopped mid-bach, unsure if they were witnessing a joke or the start of a scandal, past our friends, our neighbors, her colleagues, every face suddenly interested in the floor. Not one person followed. I stepped into the warm night, my suit jacket unbuttoned, my ring finger feeling lighter than it had in years. Behind me, I could still hear her voice, light, teasing, victorious. "Oh, come on, everyone, he's fine. He always walks away when he's embarrassed." Let her think that. Let them all think that. Because this wasn't embarrassment. This wasn't shock. This wasn't weakness. This was checkmate. And if you've ever been quietly written off, humiliated, or dismissed by someone who believed they owned you, don't leave just yet. This story's not about heartbreak. It's about precision. And the look on her face, well, that part's coming. Also, since more than 97% of people hear stories like this without subscribing, if you're one of them, consider hitting that follow button. It helps the team bring you more real, twisted tales just like this one. Back inside the ballroom, she twirled a little in her dress like the belle of her own grotesque ball. She laughed with her wine glass raised high, toasting again. To honesty, at last. Some cheered. Others avoided eye contact with her completely. Her father, Henry, however, sat still, pale, staring down at a folded note I had left beside the key. His fingers trembled, but he didn't open it. Not yet. Maybe he was scared of what it said. Maybe he already knew. The staff awkwardly tried to resume dinner service. Forks clinked against fine china. Lobster tails cooled uneaten. Somewhere, someone whispered, "Did he know? He must have known." Rose, my wife for a few more days anyway, looked too pleased with herself, like someone who just got away with flipping off a traffic cop and sped away without getting caught. But what she didn't understand is, sometimes the ticket arrives by mail. Sometimes it's registered. Sometimes it's a subpoena. She thought that was the climax of the evening, that smug little toast. But it wasn't even the opening act, because what I left behind, beyond the key and the silence, was the first domino. And when her father would finally unfold that note, the first real breath would be sucked out of that overpriced room. And when she'd try to explain herself to the board, to the trust, to the auditor, to her father, she'd realize the game wasn't played tonight. It was played 6 months ago, and she was already several moves too late. Rose woke up to silence, not solitude. The first thing she noticed was the absence of his slippers. They used to sit by the bed, well-worn, ugly things she constantly made passive-aggressive jokes about. "You know there's a sale at Nordstrom, right? You don't have to dress like a retired plumber." But now? Gone. She pulled back the duvet and checked her phone. Nothing. No missed calls, no apologetic messages, no groveling, just a string of notifications from last night's party. Pictures, tags, fake compliments. "You looked stunning. What a night." One even read, "That speech? Iconic." She smirked for about 10 seconds. Then she walked to the closet and her breath caught. His suits, gone. Not just a few, not just the ones he didn't wear, all of them. His side of the closet hung empty, the hangers swinging like little question marks. Then the watch box. A month ago, she'd laughed behind his back about that stupid collection. He treats that Rolex like it's a baby. But now, the box sat open like a coffin. Nothing left but the black velvet lining and a small envelope where the Omega used to be. It was blank, not addressed, just placed there. Panic hadn't hit her yet. She still thought this was some childish tantrum, that maybe he just left early for the gym or drove to that weird cabin he liked to think. So she walked into the office. The safe was open, empty. The passport drawer, empty. That drawer with the USB drives and emergency cash, you guessed it, empty. She texted him finally, typing fast with forced confidence. "Rose, okay, seriously? I know you were embarrassed, but this is just immature. Come home." No response. The message didn't even deliver. Now the silence started sounding louder, thick, heavy. She slipped on a coat, threw her designer bag over her shoulder, and headed out for brunch at that obnoxious little cafe she only pretended to like because her followers liked the aesthetic. Avocado crostini, sub the tomato, add truffle oil, she chirped to the waiter like nothing had happened. Then the card declined. Twice. She laughed the first time, rolled her eyes the second, then pulled out a backup card. Declined again. She offered a tight-lipped smile, tossed a few crumpled bills on the table, and left before the waiter could say another word. In the car, she called the bank. "Hi, yes, there seems to be some mistake. My cards are not working, and I'm—" "Ma'am," the rep interrupted gently, "your joint account was frozen as of this morning at 7:14 a.m. "What? By who?" "Your husband. As primary account holder, I'm also a holder." "No, ma'am, you're listed as an authorized user, not an owner." She hung up before she could hear the rest. When she pulled into her father's driveway, her fallback comfort zone, he was already waiting on the porch. Dressed in an old sweater, coffee in one hand, her husband's folded note in the other, still sealed, still unread. "Has he called?" she asked, trying to sound annoyed instead of panicked. Henry didn't answer. He just stared at the envelope like it was ticking. She reached for it. He pulled it back. "I'm not reading it," he said. "Not until I know what I'll find inside." "Oh, for God's sake, Dad. He left because he's dramatic. He's always been—" "Don't," Henry said quietly. "Don't reduce this to drama. The man walked out without a word, took every piece of his life with him, and left you with a ballroom full of silence. That's not drama, Rose. That's strategy." She scoffed. "He wouldn't know strategy if it bit him." Her father didn't respond. He just nodded toward her phone. "Check again." She did. Still nothing. And then, in a quieter voice, he added, "Did you know he came to see me 6 months ago?" She froze. "To talk estate planning. I thought it was strange then. Now I don't." "You're overreacting," she snapped. But the moment she said it, she realized. She had no idea where he was, no idea what he'd taken, no idea how much he had planned. And judging by the look on her father's face, he was starting to get an idea. The next morning, she was halfway out of town before she even realized where she was going. The car seemed to drive itself, speeding up the coast toward the summer house, their supposed escape from stress. Her white Range Rover cruised past sleepy beach towns and forgotten diners, the kind of road trip that once meant wine on the porch and barefoot Sunday mornings. But this time, her hands were locked in a death grip on the steering wheel, nails biting into leather. She didn't tell her father she was leaving. He was still stuck staring at that note, holding it like a ticking grenade. Let him sit with it. Let him be dramatic. She needed fresh air, a fireplace, a hot bath, a glass of something stronger than Chardonnay. She needed to reset. Except the gate didn't open. It was a simple wrought iron number, nothing fancy, but it had always recognized her license plate. There'd never been a problem in 10 years. But this time, nothing, just the mechanical hum of the motor refusing to engage. She leaned out the window, pressing the call button on the gate panel. A moment later, the speaker crackled. "Miss Bellamy?" "Yes, it's me. The gate isn't opening." A pause. "Oh, I'm really sorry, ma'am, but the system's been updated recently. Only approved plates can access now." She blinked. "I am the owner." A longer pause. "I think you should call Mr. Forrester," he said awkwardly. "He'll explain." She hung up before she could curse at a man who was clearly just doing his job. The house was supposed to be hers, a wedding gift from her parents, but her husband had handled the upkeep, the taxes, the property management. She never paid attention. She never had to. Now, she was dialing her family's lawyer with the kind of tight, professional smile you use when someone at the country club spills a drink on your shoes. It took him 3 minutes to pick up, and she didn't even say hello. "Why can't I get into the summer house?" Another pause. "Rose," he said, "you haven't looked at the updated title?" "Title?" Her voice cracked slightly. "What title?" "There was a reallocation done 8 months ago. It was in the quarterly documents we sent for signature, real estate restructure for tax purposes. You signed it." She laughed, sharp and flat. "You're kidding." "I assure you I'm not. The property was moved into a domestic asset trust." "A trust he controls?" "Yes, but it's technically for both of your benefits, or was at the time. Now, however, with the circumstances—" "What circumstances?" she snapped. "The trust's controlling partner, which is, of course, your husband, has sole discretion over access and management, and with him having left the marital home and declared temporary separation—" "You're telling me I don't even have a key to my own summer house?" "You don't even own the summer house anymore, Rose. Not legally. She didn't say anything. She just stared through the windshield at a property she used to brag about, used to curate Instagram perfect weekends in, the same place she told her girlfriends, "He's boring, but at least he makes money, and he lets me breathe up here." She used to say it like he was a dog who brought her slippers. Now he was the one holding the leash. She ended the call and sat there in the car, idling just outside the gate like a trespasser. The realization hit with a kind of cold clarity that didn't feel like fear. Not yet. It felt like the start of suspicion, like opening your fridge and smelling something sour, but not knowing where it's coming from. How long had he been planning this? She opened her phone, scrolled through old texts, tried to find a hint, a clue, something that would have told her he was up to something. Nothing. He'd smiled at dinners, kissed her on the cheek in front of friends. He even bought her that stupid silver bracelet in February, the one she never wore. Was that part of it? Some breadcrumb meant to keep her calm while he pulled the floor out from under her? She suddenly remembered something. Last year, he'd asked, so casually it barely registered, "Do you think we should update our estate docs? Might make sense to move a few assets into trust for tax efficiency." She'd waved him off. Sure, just email the lawyer. She signed whatever he sent without reading. Now she was locked out of her own sanctuary by a man she mocked for being too passive. And for the first time in years, Rose felt a feeling she didn't quite recognize. Not rage, not even fear. Control, but not hers. The walls in Henry's study had never felt this tight before. The old bookshelves, the mahogany desk, the crystal decanter he rarely touched, all of it suddenly looked staged, like a set piece in a bad drama. But this wasn't a play. It was his life, and someone had yanked the curtain down. He was pacing when the call finally connected. Jeffrey Warner, his financial advisor of nearly 20 years, picked up on the second ring, always punctual, always polished. "Jeffrey, I need clarity on something, about Rose, and the prenup." The other end of the line went still for a beat too long. Then, "Of course, sir. Which part are you referring to?" "The ownership clauses, real property, stock rights, inheritance limits, everything we laid out in the original document before she married that man." He still couldn't bring himself to say his son-in-law's name. Not today. Jeffrey cleared his throat. "Sir, I should let you know. There was an amendment made to those terms." Henry stopped pacing. "What amendment?" "I received a signed post-nuptial agreement last June. It was executed with your daughter's signature and notarized independently. It restructured certain clauses, most notably inheritance directives tied to the Bellamy family trust." Henry felt his hand tighten around the phone, knuckles whitening. "What exactly did she sign away?" Jeffrey hesitated again. "Sir, I strongly suggest reviewing the documents in full, but the summary is, your daughter voluntarily reduced her contingent claim on the family trust assets by 65%. She what? In exchange, she received short-term liquidity, bankable through a private account your son-in-law established for her. It was presented as part of an estate equalization strategy." Henry didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence roared. Jeffrey, now clearly nervous, added, "It was filed alongside other restructuring paperwork, some of which pertained to the real estate shift you approved for tax reasons." Everything looked above board. "She said she was reviewing documents for tax optimization, Jeffrey. You let her sign away her future like she was checking a box on a lease renewal. She insisted she understood, and with all due respect, she's not a minor." Henry hung up without saying goodbye. He stood in the middle of the study, staring at the decanter. He didn't drink often, but today he poured 2 fingers of scotch and took it down like water. Then he walked into the living room where Rose was lounging like nothing mattered, scrolling on her phone with one leg curled under her. "Darling," he said too calmly, "what exactly did you sign with your husband last summer?" She didn't look up. "What are you talking about?" "I just got off the phone with Jeffrey. He says you signed a post-nup." "Oh, that?" She laughed, light and careless. "Please, that was just some estate planning crap. He said it'd make things easier for the accountants." Henry didn't smile. She finally looked up. "Dad, come on. It's just paper. Legalese. He said it was about simplifying the tax structure for our assets." He walked to the fireplace and picked up the thick envelope Jeffrey had couriered months ago, one of many she'd shoved in a drawer, trusting that her husband would handle it. He held it out. "Do you remember reading a single page of this?" "Of course not. I don't speak fluent boring, Dad. You raised me for better things." "I raised you for responsibility, Rose." "Oh, please. He probably tricked me. He's sneaky like that, all quiet and clever and unimpressive until he isn't. But you'd love that, wouldn't you? Finally a reason to say I messed up. He didn't answer. He opened the envelope and pulled out the signature page. Her initials were on every clause, sloppy, rushed, like someone blindly authorizing a software update. She reached for the papers, annoyed now. You're making too big a deal out of this. No, Henry said. You didn't make a big enough deal out of this. She frowned. Why do you care so much? It's not like you ever liked him. I didn't. But he understood value, and now he holds most of yours. That finally shut her up. He turned away, setting the documents down gently like they might explode. You didn't just walk into a trap, Rose. You ran into it, eyes closed, holding a pen. And worse, you signed away our legacy without even blinking. She looked down at her phone again, not to check messages, but to avoid his eyes. But it didn't help. She felt it in her bones now. That quiet little man she once called a footnote in my story wasn't just rewriting her marriage. He was editing the entire family line. The glass doors still bore her name. Bellamy and Rose Consulting, etched in frosted silver letters, pristine and glowing in the mid-morning sun. It was the kind of legacy branding she'd bragged about on panel talks and magazine interviews. Feminine but firm, she once said. The kind of place people pointed at and whispered, she built that. Rose pushed through the doors like a storm in heels. The front desk girl, new, maybe 22, smiled nervously. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help? I'm Rose Bellamy, she snapped, sweeping off her sunglasses. I need access to the executive suite. My keycard isn't working. The girl blinked. Oh, one moment. She tapped something on her screen, glanced down, froze. I'm so sorry, she said, voice suddenly tighter. The system says this location is no longer affiliated with Bellamy and Rose. It was transitioned 6 weeks ago to Faro Strategies LLC. Rose leaned in. What the hell are you talking about? I believe the acquisition closed last month. The legal transfer documents were finalized and… Who sold it? She hissed. The girl's eyes flicked around like she was hoping someone else would step in, but it was just her and Rose. It says here the transaction was initiated by Mr. David Forrester. Her husband. Her loser husband. Rose stepped back, barely processing the words. The air in the lobby felt thin, like it had been vacuum sealed. Faro Strategies. She knew that name, not from the press, not from any boardroom, from Thanksgiving. That's the company her husband's cousin ran. Quiet, well-dressed, always sitting at the edge of family gatherings, sipping tea while everyone else debated politics or real estate. The one who never looked her in the eye. Of course, of course. You'll call my CFO, Rose said. Now, tell him Rose Bellamy demands a meeting immediately. The girl tapped again. Ma'am, I don't have anyone listed under that title. The executive staff now reports to Faro Strategies. I don't think you're in the system anymore. She didn't yell. Not yet. She just turned on her heel and marched toward the elevator, daring someone to stop her. Nobody did. The executive floor smelled the same. Expensive carpet, too much cologne, artificial lemon from the cleaning crew. But the photos were gone. The hallway that used to boast framed covers of Forbes Women and Fast Company with her face, stripped bare. In their place were minimal modern art prints, cool, detached, like the people who now ran the place. She stormed into the boardroom like a hurricane with a law degree, except no one was there, just an assistant sitting quietly at a desk, typing. I need the books, Rose demanded. Financials, client rosters, licensing contracts. I'm not playing games. The assistant barely looked up. Do you have an appointment? I am the appointment, she barked. Another pause. Ma'am, the woman said carefully, you're not listed as a board member anymore. In fact, according to the new governance structure, you're classified as a former stakeholder with no current access to operational or financial records. Rose's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You'll need to go through the firm's legal counsel if you have documentation to dispute that. I founded this company, she whispered, almost to herself. The assistant nodded politely. The filing shows the LLC was dissolved and absorbed. Legally, Bellamy and Rose no longer exists. That was when the rage started shaking her hands. She turned and stormed into what used to be her office, where she'd held meetings with investors, styled photo shoots, signed partnerships with a glass of Veuve in one hand. Now the door bore no name, just a room, generic, soulless. Inside there was a new desk, new chair, no photos, no trace of her. Even the signature orchid she kept on the windowsill was gone. Rose walked out without a word. Back in the elevator, she finally allowed her knees to buckle slightly. Not all the way, just enough to feel it, the first collapse. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It wasn't just silence or strategy or even revenge. It was eradication. He hadn't taken the company from her. He'd deleted it, like it was a file on his laptop he no longer needed. And worst of all, no one in the building looked surprised. The dinner was supposed to be damage control. Rose stood in the center of her marble kitchen, surrounded by catered trays of cedar plank salmon, saffron risotto, duck pâté, $2,000 of gilt-plated delicacies, and stared at her phone. The invitations had gone out 3 days ago, personal handwritten texts to 10 of her closest friends. No PR spin, no publicists, just Rose, returning to her roots. Let's reconnect, girls only, wine and truth. 0 RSVPs, not even a polite lie. She checked the time again, 7:58 p.m. She had lit the candles, dimmed the lights, staged fresh flowers around the room to match the chilled Puy de Fils. The playlist was curated down to the song, French jazz, nostalgic but not desperate. She even wore the silk top she once joked made her look too rich to be cheated on. 8:10, still nothing. At 8:17, she sent out a casual message. Rose, hey ladies, running late or already sipping cocktails without me? Silence. At 8:34, she sent another. Rose, everything okay? Text me if something came up. Still nothing. She opened Instagram, scrolled. One story from Camilla, at home in pajamas, a glass of wine, and a dog snuggled beside her. Caption, peace is declining drama in real time. Rose blinked. The wine bottle she'd opened now looked like an insult. She turned off the music. At 9:03, she poured the salmon into the trash, one fillet at a time. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was avoidance. She'd seen this before, when someone in the friend group got caught cheating, stealing, or saying something unforgivable on a hot mic, the quiet quarantine, the refusal to be seen near the fallout. But this was her, Rose Bellamy. She'd built people's platforms, hosted charity galas, funded half the group's trips to Ibiza. They owed her loyalty. And yet, at 9:17 p.m., she got her first message of the night. Emma, hey, I don't want to be rude, but did you really say that at the anniversary? Just 6 words. Did you really say that? She didn't reply. She just set the phone down and walked into the living room like it was foreign terrain. The untouched cheese board sat on the lucite coffee table like a joke. Her reflection in the glass looked distorted, eyes too wide, shoulders too high. She poured herself a glass of the expensive wine, took one sip, spat it out. Something was wrong, not just with the friendships, not just with the business, with the timing. It had all crumbled too quickly, too precisely. No chaos, just surgical removal. She climbed into her car and drove back to her father's house. The driveway was dark, no lights on, but she knew he was inside. She didn't knock. He was in the den, seated in his chair, staring at the fireplace like the flames might explain something the rest of the world couldn't. He didn't say hello. He didn't move. He just held out the envelope, same one, still sealed. Her fingers hovered over it. Someone leaked it, she said. He didn't answer. My friends are ghosting me. The banks blocked my account. The boardrooms are empty. I threw a dinner party tonight and not one person showed. Nothing. Dad. I didn't leak the note, Rose. But someone did. He looked at her then, slowly. Maybe he didn't need to leak it. Maybe the world's just catching up to what's been true for a while. She stared at the envelope. You still haven't opened it? I don't need to, he said. Whatever's in there, it's a record, not a revelation. I didn't mean what I said at the party, she muttered. Then why did you say it? She didn't have an answer. He handed the envelope to her again. She took it, held it like a dead bird, still warm in her hands, still capable of ruining her life the moment it opened. I'll read it when I'm ready, she whispered. Her father stood. So will everyone else, Rose. That's what you don't understand. He doesn't need to chase revenge. He just made it readable. Outside, her phone buzzed. Another message. Lila. Wait, is it true he left you with nothing? She didn't respond, because that part wasn't even the worst yet. The envelope was softer now. It had passed between hands like a cursed relic, her husband's, her father's, now hers. It sat on the edge of her vanity, taunting her every morning, every night like a silent witness. She'd tucked it under silk scarves, stuffed it into drawers, pretended it didn't exist. But it always came back. She opened it at 3:07 a.m., the hour of insomnia, when lies run out of oxygen and the truth starts pounding like a headache. She didn't light a candle, didn't pour wine, just turned on the bathroom mirror light, cold and unforgiving, and sat down with the envelope in her lap like she was about to read her own eulogy. No preamble, no dear Rose, just dates, just moments, each one like a nail. October 12th. You joked about poisoning my soup in front of your friends. You said it while laughing. No one else did. November 3rd. You told Madison and Claire I was your investor, not your partner, that you were leveraging a midlife crisis into capital. December 21st. You said I'd never be enough for your world, and that marrying me was like buying a sweater you never really liked but kept because it was warm. She stopped reading, but the note wasn't done. February 14th. You gave me a coupon for a massage and told me, don't make it weird. March 4th. You removed my name from the nonprofit donor wall, said optics mattered more. May 8th. You told a reporter I had just handled spreadsheets and signed checks. They quoted you. I read it. Her hand trembled. The paper was thin but suddenly felt heavy, like lead disguised as linen. Then, at the bottom, one final line. I was enough to buy your world and take it back. That was it. No curse words, no threats, no dramatic plea for justice, just receipts. Proof she hadn't just broken his heart. She'd humiliated him in slivers. Death by snide comment, by one-liner, by cocktail party jabs delivered with a smile and a hand on his shoulder like she owned him. She didn't even remember saying half of it. But now? Now she remembered the exact shape of his face in those moments. The half smile, the tight nod, the way he'd quietly excuse himself, refill her glass, stand a little too still behind her at the next event. She thought he was being passive. She didn't realize he was recording. Rose folded the note back up, slowly, as if speed would make it hurt more. Her fingertips brushed the paper edges like they could undo what they'd just read. The bathroom mirror reflected a version of her she didn't recognize. Eyes swollen, mascara smudged from days ago, a silk robe over a tank top she didn't remember putting on. Her whole life had been curated, posed, filtered. But this was raw, and what hit her hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was the calm. No rage, no accusations, just documentation, a private audit of a public life. He hadn't left because of one grand betrayal. He'd left because he finally accepted the truth. She was never going to stop minimizing him. And now the world was reading his side of the story without him having to say a word. The knock came just as the espresso machine hissed to life. She hadn't been expecting anyone, hadn't expected much of anything lately. Most people didn't knock anymore. They just unfollowed, unsubscribed, or ghosted her into digital dust. But this wasn't a text. This wasn't a silence. This was deliberate. She opened the door to her father standing on the porch, a folded paper in one hand and eyes that looked like they hadn't closed in days. "Can I come in?" he asked, already walking past her. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "What's going on?" Henry didn't sit. He stood near the kitchen island, looking at her granite countertops like they might give him strength. He didn't speak for a moment. Then softly, too softly, he asked, "Tell me you didn't forge my signature on the grant paperwork." Her stomach dropped like a shot bird. I don't know what you're talking about," she said too quickly. "That must have been some kind of admin error. I was just consolidating approvals." "Stop," she froze. "I've sat on enough boards in my life to know what forged authorization looks like," he said, and the Foundation's counsel confirmed it. They received a complaint, an anonymous one, backed by screenshots, access logs, even metadata. "You logged in from your personal laptop? The signature on the Bellamy education grant? Not mine." She tried again. "I didn't think it mattered. You would have approved it anyway. It was just a formality." "No, Rose," he snapped, eyes flaring for the first time. "A formality is forgetting to RSVP to a charity gala. A formality is not falsifying a donor authorization to redirect $850,000. She laughed nervously, hands raised like she could rewind the room. It wasn't stealing. It was just moving the money to a better cause, one with more public visibility. It helped the brand, helped you," he said. She stopped mid-sentence. "They've removed you from all charitable appointments," he continued. "Bellamy Foundation, Women in Equity, the Trust for Civic Design, every single one, effective immediately. Your photo's already off the websites." "No," she whispered, "that's impossible." "It's not. But I've been building those brands. I'm the one who raised visibility, who ran the socials, brought in the donors, made the press rounds." "And what did you do with that visibility?" he asked. "You used it to turn our name into a punchline." She flinched. He placed the folded complaint packet on the counter and tapped it with one finger. "This is what I built my name on. Trust. I may be old-fashioned, but I believed in dignity, in stewardship, and you forged your own father's signature because a foundation gala didn't want you in the center of the photo." It was one form. It was a betrayal. Rose tried to find a new angle, some leverage, some excuse, but all that came out was a hollow defense. You've always resented my ambition. He stared at her like she'd just spoken in a language he didn't recognize. I've always feared your ambition, he corrected, because it never had brakes, only mirrors. She opened her mouth again. Nothing came. You didn't just blow up your marriage, he said, stepping back. You took down 30 years of quiet credibility and soaked it in gasoline. I didn't know it would. Of course you didn't, because you never read the fine print, not in business, not in love, not even in blood. His voice cracked at the end, just slightly, enough to land. Rose, he said, and his words felt final, like a benediction spoken backward. You've turned my name into ash. Then he walked out. No hug, no forgiveness, no offer to clean up the mess, just the sound of a father, once proud, once patient, slipping into the past tense. And Rose? She didn't follow, because for the first time she couldn't tell which door was still open. It started with the Amex, declined at the airport lounge in front of a hostess she once tipped with $100 bills, just because. Rose had chalked it up to a glitch, some internal banking hiccup. It happens. She smiled tightly, pulled out another card, declined again. The hostess blinked, unsure whether to apologize or pretend it wasn't happening. Try it again, Rose said, voice brittle. The third card failed too. By the time she made it back to the car, a black SUV she'd barely driven but posted about relentlessly, her phone buzzed with a fraud alert. Not from her bank, but from her credit monitoring app. Notice, your credit score has dropped 114 points. Review your accounts for recent changes. She sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes without moving. The leather felt cold, foreign. She looked around, realizing for the first time that none of the paperwork for the car was in her name. It had always been his thing. He handled the leases, the insurance, the servicing. Let me worry about it, he used to say. She hated how often she let him. When she finally turned the key, nothing. The dashboard flashed red, then black, then a message she'd never seen before. Vehicle disabled, contact lesser. She blinked, tried again, same message. It was towed 2 hours later, silently, as she stood helpless in a now unfamiliar airport parking lot, watching her life pull away one wheel rotation at a time. The concierge at her building didn't make eye contact when she arrived back at the penthouse. The elevator required a new key card, one she no longer had. The front desk made a call, whispered something into the phone, then told her gently, "There's an audit pending, Miss Bellamy. We've been instructed to suspend access until it clears." She laughed, a sharp, breathless laugh. Audit? On what grounds? But the woman didn't answer, just stared at her with that don't shoot the messenger look she used to wear herself when delivering bad news to investors. Rose took the stairs, 33 flights, just to prove she could. When she got to the door, her key didn't work. She kicked it, hard. No one answered. Inside, maybe someone was packing her life into boxes. Maybe the audit wasn't about tax errors or suspicious activity. Maybe it was about ownership. And maybe, just maybe, she had nothing left to audit. She called his number, the one she'd memorized years ago. It rang once, then a voice. "This number is no longer in service." She tried another. His old assistant, no answer. Another. His cousin's firm, voicemail. Every bridge, every contact, every thread back to him. Cut. At first, she panicked, opened her laptop, tried to log into her personal accounts. Miles programs, fashion memberships, lounge subscriptions, access denied, account suspended, no record found. Even her email had a warning banner now. "Your subscription has lapsed. Please renew your identity verification." She stared at the screen, watched her own digital existence unravel like a sweater pulled from the wrong end. Then the letters came, registered mail, stacked at the front desk. One by one, they arrived. Notice of termination, notice of eviction, notice of transfer of ownership. Each one cold, clinical, precise, each one bearing her name not as a resident or a partner or a stakeholder, but as a former everything. Rose laid them out across the marble kitchen counter of her father's guest house like cards from a rigged deck. No one had to scream, no one had to drag her to court or humiliate her on television. She wasn't being punished. She was being removed, erased from systems, from signatures, from access lists, from memory, quietly, elegantly, completely. The way he used to erase typos in their business drafts, without red ink, without fanfare, just gone. And as she stood there, surrounded by silence and letters and denial slips, it hit her. He hadn't left her with nothing. He'd just taken back what was his. And what terrified her wasn't how much she'd lost. It was how little had ever been hers to begin with. The room was smaller than expected, no chandeliers, no velvet chairs, just a long mahogany table surrounded by silence, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting to pronounce a sentence. Rose sat at one end, hands folded in her lap like a child who knew she was already too late. Her father stood at the head of the table, flanked by attorneys, trustees, and legacy guardians who had known her since she was a precocious brat in patent leather shoes. The hearing was private, technically, but nothing stays private anymore, especially not when your humiliation goes viral at 1:43 a.m. and wakes up the whole damn world by sunrise. The video was everywhere. The dress, the glass, the toast. To the man who paid for it all, but was never my real love. On loop, in reels, in GIFs, with captions like "Queen behavior" and "Get it, girl." Only those posts aged faster than milk. By morning, the narrative had shifted. The man she humiliated just walked away, and apparently took everything with him. A trustee cleared his throat. Before we begin, we'd like to enter into record the following legal statement, filed 3 weeks prior to the event in question. Her father took the document in trembling hands, thick stock paper bound with a ribbon, old school, intentional. He began to read aloud. In accordance with Section 14C of the Bellamy-Forrester Prenuptial Agreement, any event of public defamation or reputational harm, including but not limited to slander, recorded humiliation, or character disparagement in a public or semi-public forum, shall trigger immediate dissolution of joint holdings and forfeiture of contingent claims by the offending party. He paused. Due to the events of redacted, hereafter referred to as the toast, the triggering clause has been activated. The resulting action renders Miss Rose Bellamy's entitlement to all marital and family-linked assets null and void. A beat of silence. Rose felt her lungs shrink. Her father kept reading, but now his voice wavered. Furthermore, the properties, trusts, shares, and residual holdings tied to the Forrester estate shall revert to original ownership, as filed under Restructuring Order 6D, executed in June of this year. He stopped again, blinked, then he looked at her, directly. "Rose," he said, voice lower, rawer, "tell me you didn't know." But he already knew the answer. Everyone in the room did. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because in the corner of the table, an iPad sat playing the video on mute, looping that same damn scene. Her face lit by chandeliers, eyes gleaming, voice clear. To the man who paid for it all, but was never my real love. And then, he entered, not grandly, not to make a point. He just walked in through the side door, quiet, undistracting, like he was coming home from a long day of errands. A simple gray suit, no tie, hands in his pockets. He didn't look at anyone except the lawyer, who nodded in acknowledgement. But Rose saw him, her breath caught. He didn't look smug, or victorious, or broken. He looked free, and that's what shattered her. "Why?" she whispered, voice barely audible. He turned to her, calm, detached, kind even. "Because I was never your real love, Rose," he said. "Just your reflection." A pause. "I left," he added, "and took the mirror with me." Then he turned away, not to leave, not just yet, but because there was nothing more to say. The trustee marked the record closed. Her father sat down heavily, rubbing his temples like he'd just read a death certificate. Rose stared at the polished table in front of her. In the reflection, her face looked older, smaller, less composed, like the real version of herself had finally surfaced, and was horrified by what she saw. No one consoled her, no one touched her hand, no one interrupted the silence, because in that room, everyone understood something she'd spent a lifetime ignoring. It's not revenge when the truth does the work for you. And when you toast to ghosts, don't be surprised when they answer.